At 35,000 feet, Flight 709 cut through the sky like a silver arrow, its engines humming with a steady, comforting rhythm. Below, the vast ocean stretched endlessly, dark blue and calm, reflecting the late afternoon sun. Inside the cabin, everything felt normal, almost boring in the way routine flights often were. Passengers slept with blankets pulled up to their chins. Some watched movies, their faces glowing softly in the seatback screens. Others stared out the windows, lost in thoughts of where they had been or where they were going. No one sensed what was about to happen. In the cockpit, Captain Miller adjusted his headset and glanced at the instruments. First Officer Daniels was finishing a routine systems check. They had flown this route dozens of times. The aircraft was stable. Weather was clear. Nothing demanded concern. Then, without warning, a sharp alarm cut through the cockpit. A red light flashed. Before either pilot could speak, the oxygen pressure dropped violently. Captain Miller gasped, his hand reaching instinctively for the mask, but his vision blurred. The edges of the cockpit darkened, as if someone had pulled a curtain over his eyes. He tried to speak, but the words never came. First Officer Daniels slumped forward seconds later. The cockpit went silent. No voices. No commands. Only the steady, terrifying sound of a plane flying itself. In the cabin, Sarah was pouring water for an elderly passenger when she felt it. A strange shift in the air. Not turbulence. Something else. Something wrong. She looked up. The call light panel blinked erratically. A baby started crying 3 rows back. A man near the aisle pressed the assistance button, confused. "Miss?" he asked. "Is everything okay?" Before Sarah could answer, the intercom chimed. Once, twice, then nothing. Flight attendants exchanged uneasy looks. Normally, the cockpit responded instantly. This time, silence. Senior Attendant Lisa hurried toward the cockpit door and pressed the intercom. "Cockpit, this is Lisa. Please respond." Nothing. She knocked. No answer. She knocked harder. Still nothing. A chill ran through Sarah's chest. Panic began spreading through the cabin like a slow-burning fire. Passengers whispered. Some stood up, craning their necks to see what was happening. A man in a business suit muttered, "That's not normal," gripping his armrest too tightly. Lisa turned back to the crew, her voice tight. "I'm not getting anything from the cockpit." The words landed heavily. Training manuals flashed through Sarah's mind. If the cockpit is unresponsive, if pilots are incapacitated, her heart started racing. Lisa tried the emergency access code. The keypad beeped, but the door remained locked. The countdown timer began. 30 seconds. 20. 10. The alarm sounded. And still, no response from inside. Lisa's face went pale. "This shouldn't be happening," she whispered. Passengers were standing now. Fear showed clearly on their faces. Someone shouted, "What's going on?" Another voice cried, "Are the pilots okay?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. She wasn't supposed to say anything. She had buried it for years. But in that moment, as the plane continued hurtling forward through empty sky, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp, her hands on a smaller aircraft's controls. Her father's voice, calm but firm. "Eyes on the horizon, Sarah. Don't fight the plane. Feel it." Her father had been a test pilot, and when no one else was around, he had taught her to fly. Sarah stepped forward before she even realized she was moving. "Lisa," she said quietly, "let me try something." Lisa turned, desperation in her eyes. "What? I might be able to help." The other attendants stared at her. Sarah swallowed. Her mouth was dry. "I trained as a civilian flight student. A long time ago. I never finished, but I know the basics." For a second, no one spoke. Then Lisa nodded sharply. "Do it." The emergency override clicked. The cockpit door unlocked. Sarah pushed it open. The sight inside froze her blood. Captain Miller was slumped in his seat, head tilted unnaturally to one side. The first officer lay forward, unmoving, his headset dangling. The instruments glowed in front of them. Alive, active, uncaring. The plane was still flying. But no one was flying it. Sarah's breath caught in her chest. For half a second, fear threatened to paralyze her completely. She had never seen a cockpit like this. So quiet, so wrong. She rushed to the pilots, shaking them gently. "Captain?" No response. She checked their masks. Oxygen levels were dangerously low. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to move, placing the emergency oxygen masks over their faces, turning the flow to maximum. "Please breathe," she thought desperately. Behind her, Lisa called out, "Sarah, what's happening?" Sarah turned back, her face pale. "They're unconscious," she said. Both of them. A collective gasp echoed from the cabin. Sarah stepped into the captain's seat. The chair felt enormous. The controls looked intimidating. Rows of switches. Screens filled with numbers and symbols. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. "You can do this," she told herself. "You've trained for this, just not like this." She wrapped her hands around the yoke. The plane responded. Just slightly. Enough to remind her of the terrifying truth. She was holding 180 lives in her hands. The autopilot was engaged. For now. But she knew that wouldn't be enough forever. Her eyes moved instinctively to the artificial horizon, the altitude indicator, the airspeed, just like her father had taught her. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky stretched endlessly. No runway. No help. Just air and time. Sarah swallowed hard and reached for the radio. Somewhere on the ground, someone had to be listening. Because at 35,000 feet, over the ocean, one thing was painfully clear. The plane was flying. But she was the only one left to fly it. Sarah sat in the captain's seat, her hands gripping the armrests so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the warning chimes echoing through the cockpit. Each beat felt like a countdown she couldn't see. The aircraft was still stable. For now. Autopilot engaged. Altitude holding. Speed steady. But Sarah knew better than to trust calm at 35,000 feet. She stared at the instruments, trying to slow her breathing. The artificial horizon glowed blue and brown, perfectly level, mocking her fear with its precision. Outside the windshield, clouds drifted past as if nothing in the world was wrong. Inside the cockpit, everything was wrong. Behind her, the cabin buzzed with anxious voices. She could hear murmurs rising, passengers sensing danger, even without understanding it. Somewhere, a child cried. Somewhere else, a man prayed under his breath. Sarah swallowed hard. Focus, she told herself. One step at a time. She reached for the radio. Her fingers hovered over the switch for a split second. Just long enough for doubt to creep in. What if she said the wrong thing? What if she made it worse? What if help never came? Then she remembered her father's voice again, steady as ever. When you don't know what to do, he used to say, do the next right thing. Sarah pressed the button. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Her voice cracked on the first word, but she forced herself to continue. This is Flight 709. Both pilots are unconscious due to oxygen failure. I repeat, both pilots are unconscious. I am not a certified pilot. I need immediate assistance. The radio hissed. For a moment there was nothing but static. That silence was worse than any alarm. Then, Flight 709, this is air traffic control. Say again your status. Sarah exhaled shakily, relieved that someone, anyone, was listening. Air traffic control. Both pilots are incapacitated. I'm a flight attendant. I have limited flight training. Autopilot is engaged. On the other end of the line, voices overlapped. She could hear muffled conversations, rapid questions being thrown back and forth. Someone cursed quietly. Someone else said, "This can't be real." Then the controller's voice returned, tighter now. "Flight 709, identify the pilot in command. What is your call sign?" The question hit her like a wall. Call sign. Sarah froze. Her eyes flicked to the captain's paperwork, the flight number, the standard civilian identifiers. She knew those, but something deep inside her hesitated. This wasn't just a normal emergency. She could feel it. Her father had warned her about moments like this, moments where doing the expected thing wasn't enough. Her hand trembled on the radio switch. For a second, she considered giving the standard civilian response. But then she remembered a different cockpit, a different sky, a younger version of herself sitting beside her father as he tested experimental aircraft, his voice calm even when everything around them wasn't. He had made her memorize something, a name, a call sign, a last resort identifier used only when everything else had failed. Sarah closed her eyes and spoke. "This is call sign, Raven 9. The radio went silent. Not static, not interference. Silence. Sarah's stomach dropped. Had she made a mistake? Had she said something wrong? She opened her eyes, staring at the instrument panel, her pulse roaring in her ears. Every second stretched painfully long. The cabin behind her seemed to fade away as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, faintly, she heard it. Someone whispering on the other end of the line. Did she just say Raven 9? Another voice. Lower. Urgent. That call sign hasn't been used in years. The controller came back on. His tone, completely different now. No longer procedural. No longer calm. Flight 709. Confirm again. Did you say Raven 9? Sarah's throat tightened. Yes, she said softly. Raven 9. The response was immediate. All stations, stand by. The frequency clicked. Then, everything changed. The familiar civilian chatter disappeared, replaced by a clear, isolated channel. The background noise vanished. The air itself seemed quieter. A new voice came through the radio. It was calm, controlled, unshakable. Raven 9, this is F-22 Raptor Squadron. We hear you. Sarah's breath caught. F-22s, military. She hadn't expected that. Her mind raced. Why would the Air Force be responding? What had her father been involved in? She swallowed and replied. F-22 Squadron, this is Raven 9. I am aboard a commercial aircraft. Both pilots are unconscious. I need guidance. There was a brief pause, not uncertainty, but calculation. Then the voice returned. Raven 9, we are scrambling 2 Raptors to your position. Maintain current heading and altitude. Do not disengage autopilot unless instructed. Sarah nodded instinctively, even though they couldn't see her. Yes. Understood. Another voice joined the channel, this one slightly amused but respectful. Raven 9, whoever you are, that call sign just lit up half our command board. Sarah's hands tightened around the yoke. I didn't know who else to call, she admitted. The pilot responded gently. You called the right people. Moments later, her radar display flickered. 2 new blips appeared, closing fast. Sarah leaned forward, peering out the windshield. And then she saw them. 2 dark shapes cut through the clouds like blades, sleek, sharp, unreal. Sunlight flashed off their angular wings as they pulled alongside the aircraft, one on each side, matching speed perfectly. F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighter jets in the world. Flying beside her. For the first time since the cockpit door had opened, Sarah felt something new replace the fear twisting in her chest. She wasn't alone. The lead pilot spoke again. Raven 9, visual contact established. We'll be with you the whole way. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she didn't have time to shed. Thank you, she whispered. There was a brief pause. Then the pilot asked a question that sent a chill through her. Raven 9, how do you know that call sign? Sarah hesitated. Her gaze drifted to the unconscious captain, then to the endless sky beyond the glass. My father, she said quietly. He was a test pilot. He trained me, just in case. The radio stayed silent for a moment. When the voice returned, it was softer. Then you're exactly who we need. Outside, the two Raptors adjusted their position, wings tilting slightly as if saluting her. The lead pilot spoke one last time before switching to guidance mode. All right, Raven 9. Listen carefully. We're going to get you. And everyone on that plane home. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying her hands. At 35,000 feet, surrounded by sky and steel, with 180 lives behind her, the call sign her father had given her had finally found its purpose. And the real fight to save the plane had just begun. Two F-22 fighter jets burst through the clouds like shadows made of steel. Sarah saw them before she fully believed they were real, sleek, angular shapes sliding into position beside the commercial aircraft, one off each wing. They moved with frightening precision, perfectly matched to her speed. Their engines silent from this distance, their presence overwhelming. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. The sky around them felt suddenly smaller. Inside the cockpit, the instruments glowed steadily, but Sarah's hands trembled on the controls. She turned her head slowly, staring out the left window. The nearest Raptor was so close she could make out its markings, the sharp lines of its canopy, the faint reflection of her own aircraft mirrored on its skin. They weren't just escorting her. They were watching her. The radio crackled. Raven 9, visual confirmed. The voice was calm, professional, but underneath it, something else lingered. Recognition. Another voice joined the channel, lower, thoughtful. Command was right, the second pilot said quietly. That call sign hasn't been spoken in a long time. Sarah's chest tightened. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely steady. There was a brief pause, the kind filled not with uncertainty but with memory. Raven 9 was used by only one unit. The lead pilot finally said, experimental emergency flight trainees, civilian compatible, trained by the Air Force for last resort scenarios. Sarah closed her eyes. Her father. The cockpit seemed to blur around her as memories flooded back. Late nights in quiet hangars, chalk diagrams sketched on concrete floors, his voice patient but relentless. Again, he would say, you don't memorize procedures so you can remember them. You memorize them so you can't forget them. Her throat tightened. My father, her voice cracked despite her effort to stay composed. He was a test pilot. He trained me as a backup. Not for combat. Not for missions. Just for moments when no one else could fly. Outside, the Raptors held position, unwavering. He made me memorize everything, she continued, tears burning her eyes now. Emergency approaches. Instrument failures. Assisted landings. He said it was unlikely I'd ever need it. She swallowed. He was wrong. The radio stayed silent. No instructions. No reassurance. Just silence. For a terrifying second, Sarah wondered if she had said too much, or not enough. If this was the moment where even the Air Force decided the situation was beyond saving. Then the lead pilot spoke again. His voice was different now. Gentler. All right, Raven 9, he said. You're not alone anymore. Sarah exhaled sharply, a breath she felt she'd been holding for years. The second pilot chimed in, steady and clear. We're going to guide you all the way down, step by step. You focus on listening. We'll handle the rest. Sarah nodded instinctively. Yes, she said, I'm ready. The Raptors shifted position slightly, one moving ahead, the other sliding back to monitor her altitude and alignment. On Sarah's display, the data updated as military-grade systems began feeding into her cockpit. The lead pilot spoke again. Raven 9, confirm airspeed. She glanced at the instrument. 275 knots. Good, he replied. Maintain that for now. Autopilot stays engaged. We're going to bring you down slow and smooth. Her fingers hovered over the controls, resisting the urge to grip too tightly. Altitude check, the second pilot said. 350, Sarah answered. Descending is available when instructed. Copy that. The professionalism in their voices grounded her. Every command was precise, every word deliberate. They weren't rushing her. and that somehow made the situation feel more real. Below them, the ocean stretched endlessly. Somewhere ahead, land waited, but it might as well have been another world. The lead pilot continued. Raven 9, we'll begin a controlled descent in 2 minutes. When I say mark, reduce throttle to 75%. Sarah repeated the instruction quietly to herself, just as her father had taught her. Throttle, percent, timing, mark. She moved the lever. The aircraft responded immediately, nose dipping just slightly. The change in motion rippled through the cabin. Sarah imagined passengers gripping armrests, wondering if this was the beginning of the end or the beginning of survival. The descent began. Minutes passed like hours. Every adjustment felt enormous. Every indicator mattered. The Raptors never left her side. Altitude now 300, Sarah reported. Excellent, the lead pilot said. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Those words hit her harder than she expected. Her father had used them once, after her first solo emergency simulation. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she blinked it clear. There was no room for emotion now. The second pilot spoke. Raven 9, begin flap extension to position 1. Sarah reached for the control. Flaps 1. The aircraft slowed slightly, settling into a more stable descent profile. Good, the pilot said. Now breathe. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath again until she exhaled shakily. Outside the cockpit window, the sky darkened slightly as clouds thickened. The Raptors cut through them effortlessly, emerging moments later into clearer air. Then, lights. Faint at first. A thin glowing line on the horizon. Sarah leaned forward. Runway in sight, she whispered. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Confirmed, the lead pilot replied. That's your home. The approach phase began. This was the part her father had drilled into her relentlessly. Speed control. Angle of descent. Alignment. There were no second chances here. Raven 9. Reduce speed to 210, the second pilot instructed. Flaps to 2. Sarah complied, hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. Looking good, came the response. You're lined up perfectly. The runway lights grew brighter, larger, stretching out like a promise and a threat all at once. She could see emergency vehicles lining the tarmac, flashing red and blue, waiting for her decision to succeed. Or fail. Raven 9, the lead pilot said quietly, from this point on, it's you. Sarah nodded, eyes fixed forward. I know. Remember, he continued, don't force it. Let the aircraft land itself. You're just guiding it home, she swallowed. 180 souls behind you, the second pilot added softly. Sarah tightened her grip on the yoke, not in fear, but in resolve. I won't fail them, she said. The final descent. Altitude dropping. Speed stable. The ground rushing up to meet her. The moment stretched impossibly long. Then, now the lead pilot said. Sarah eased back gently. The plane's nose lifted slightly. The wheels touched down, hard, but straight. The impact thundered through the aircraft, followed by the scream of tires against runway. The cabin jolted violently. Sarah held the controls steady, fighting the instinct to overcorrect. Reverse thrust, the second pilot commanded. She pulled the levers. The aircraft slowed. Faster. Slower. The end of the runway rushed toward them. Then passed beneath them. The plane rolled to a stop. For one heartbeat. Silence. Then cheers erupted from the cabin, muffled but unmistakable. Sarah sagged back in the seat, tears finally spilling down her cheeks as the weight of the moment crashed over her. On the radio, the lead pilot spoke one last time. Well done, Raven 9. Outside, the two F-22s pulled up sharply, roaring into the sky, disappearing into the clouds as suddenly as they had arrived. Sarah looked down at her shaking hands. 180 lives. Safe. And in the quiet cockpit, she whispered the words her father had once said to her after a perfect landing. Mission complete. The landing was hard, not graceful, Not smooth, not the kind pilots brag about later, but it was straight. And more importantly, it was safe. The moment the wheels slammed against the runway, the entire aircraft shuddered like a living thing finally allowed to rest. The sound was thunderous, metal meeting earth at high speed, followed by the long, screaming cry of tires burning against concrete. Inside the cockpit, Sarah held the controls with everything she had left. Her arms ached. Her hands trembled. Her jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt. Easy, easy, she whispered to herself, repeating the words her father had drilled into her years ago. The plane slowed. Faster. Slower. The runway lights rushed past the windows, blinding and brilliant. Emergency vehicles lined both sides. Fire trucks, ambulances, security, red and blue lights flashing like a heartbeat guiding her forward. Reverse thrust roared. The aircraft decelerated sharply. Passengers thrown forward against their seatbelts, gasps and cries filling the cabin. Then, stillness. The plane rolled one final time. And stopped. For 1 second, absolute silence. No engines screaming. No alarms. No instructions. Just the sound of air conditioning and 180 people realizing they were still alive. Then the cabin exploded. Applause thundered through the aircraft, raw and uncontrollable. People cried openly, grown men burying their faces in their hands, strangers hugging each other, prayers spoken out loud in a dozen different languages. Some laughed hysterically. Some sobbed. Some simply sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. A woman in the back fell to her knees in the aisle, whispering thank you over and over. A man clutched his phone, calling his wife through tears, repeating the same words again and again. I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm coming home. Up front, Sarah didn't hear any of it at first. She was still gripping the controls, still bracing, still expecting something to go wrong. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as adrenaline slowly began to drain from her body. Her vision blurred. Her hands shook harder now, no longer held steady by fear and focus. Then she heard it. Applause. She turned her head slightly, listening as the sound reached the cockpit. Muffled. Distant, but unmistakable. She had done it. Her shoulders sagged as the weight of the moment finally crushed down on her. She leaned back in the captain's seat, tears spilling freely now, her breath breaking into quiet, uncontrollable sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered, to no one and to everyone. I'm sorry it wasn't perfect. Behind her, the cockpit door opened carefully. Lisa stepped inside, eyes red, face pale, her hands shaking as badly as Sarah's. You did it, Lisa said softly. You saved us. Sarah shook her head weakly. I just followed instructions. Lisa knelt beside her and took her hand. You brought 180 people home, she said. That's not just anything. Outside, the emergency crews swarmed the aircraft. Firefighters sprayed cooling foam near the wheels. Paramedics rushed forward with stretchers as ground control coordinated the shutdown. The unconscious pilots were carefully removed, oxygen masks still in place, both breathing, alive. And high above the runway, unseen by most of the passengers, 2 F-22 fighter jets circled once. Just once. A silent salute. Then they climbed sharply, engines roaring as they disappeared into the clouds, back into the sky where stories like this are never supposed to exist. Hours later, the terminal was chaos. News cameras, authorities, medical teams, families crying as they reunited with loved ones. Sarah sat alone in a quiet operations room, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. She stared at her hands, still amazed they were steady enough now to hold a cup of water. A man in a headset entered, the air traffic controller who had stayed on the line with her from the moment she said Raven 9. He removed his headset slowly and sat across from her. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he asked the question everyone else was asking. How did you stay so calm? Sarah smiled faintly. Not because it was funny, but because the answer was simple. She looked through the window toward the runway, where the aircraft sat surrounded by lights and people, no longer a machine of fear, but a symbol of survival. My father always said. She began. Her voice softened. Fear is loud. Training is quiet. And in the air you listen to what's quiet. The controller nodded slowly. She continued, barely above a whisper. He used to look at me after the hardest simulations and say, "Remember this, Sarah. Raven 9 never quits." Her throat tightened. I didn't feel brave, she admitted. I was terrified. I just didn't stop. The controller stood. Well, he said gently, 180 people are going home tonight because you didn't. By morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines called her a miracle, a hero, a once-in-a-lifetime survivor. But Sarah knew the truth. She hadn't been special. She had been prepared. She had been scared. And she had chosen courage anyway. Passengers sent letters. Parents sent photos of children who would grow up because she had held the controls steady. Strangers thanked her for a gift she never expected to give. Sarah kept one thing from that day. Not a medal, not a uniform, not a spotlight. Just a small card her father had written years ago, tucked into her bag and forgotten until now. On it were 3 words, Raven 9 never quits. That day, 180 passengers went home, and the world learned something it often forgets. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they wear fear. And choose courage anyway.